Hello, welcome everybody at our second session at Republica in Thessaloniki. I'm extremely happy that Mushon and Maya are here, and they prepared really great input on and a keynote on data-driven determinism and how you can make politics not only through data, like it's a trend in the past years, but also looking into speculative sides of this in sci-fi and all these, more cultural, more artsy ways. And as we have a small group here, and we also have the live stream, hello live stream, welcome. We're really happy about any feedback that you have. You can share it via Twitter, via Facebook, and also here after the talk. We're really happy if you put in your thoughts about it. And now I give the stage to Mushon and Maya. Thank you very much.
So, okay, I will be using this instead. So okay. Hello. So, hi, I'm Mushon. We're going to talk about a lot of themes that you've started to hear about in the previous talk, but we'll throw a couple of words that have not appeared before, like science fiction and prediction and determinism and things like that we feel are a part of the discussion that started to happen here in the previous talk. So Maya and I are going to kind of do it together. I'm going to start with a talk to introduce the themes, and then Maya would come with her own intervention. So the way it's going to be structured is I'm going to talk a bit about what do we mean by data-driven determinism, and then kind of suggest some models for future thinking, ways that people are thinking about the future, other ways that we might want to use. And then I'm going to suggest that we should cancel the apocalypse. So we'll start with data-driven determinism. And now, forgive me for being the second presentation out of two presentations that are starting with a reference to Greek mythology. Don't take it personally. It was there even before this was supposed to be in Greece, but take it as a compliment. So this idea of man versus destiny, as we know it from the Greek tragedy, this idea that that we think about the past, and we know how the past has a certain narrative, a fixed narrative, and the way we think about the future is kind of a mirror image of the same thing. So determinism expects a single, irreversible future, right, modeled after the past. And as we know, in the Greek mythology and in so many stories following, when someone is trying to run away from the fate, they never succeed, right? The fate is set. We don't have a way to tap into it, but if we do, there's no way for us to change it, because we think about the future the way we think about the past. Now, that's how it happened then, right? Today it's different. Today we want data. We want a political debate based on facts, right? On an agreeable, rational, common ground. Especially in the light of filter bubbles, fake news, climate denialism, we need data. We can't just be told that, there's some omen and somebody did a lot of drugs and then they decided that they know the future. Or do we? And then let's try to think, how do we think about the future through data? Prediction algorithms are, in a way, our modern day oracles. They extrapolate patterns and trends from the past into the future by collecting data, then finding patterns and trends within the data and extrapolating them into the future, right? And this is something that I'm quite familiar with in my own work. As a designer, I visualize prediction of traffic to ease pressures on road, and predictions of energy consumption to help lead a more efficient and clean energy ecosystem. But I have some questions when it comes to politics, right? Because this is also the ethics of the liberal left. Facts and data, science and economics, they are the things that are driving the Remain campaign. They're also the things that are that have been driving the Hillary Clinton campaign in the US. Public policy informed by numbers. The belief in numbers and the belief in data-driven policy have even informed the campaign itself. So the numbers really decide who are we going to even talk to. Like if some in the case of the U.S. If some states would never vote for us, why should we even talk to them, right? We know that they will never vote for us, therefore we won't go there. We know we know where that led, and at the heart of the approach, at the heart of this kind of ideology, is that it's about maintaining the status quo, right? Both the Remain campaign and the Hillary Clinton campaign were saying things are good as they are, and this is pretty much as good as it gets, right? It's not going to get much better than this. It's probably going to get a bit worse. On the other hand, you have the Leave campaign in Britain and this guy in the US, and you can see that the language is very different. The language is about control. The language is about asserting some kind of agency towards change. If we look at the sign behind Trump, we want a future. People believe that they should do something to have a future. And this really sounds familiar from a completely different movement. The slogan of the progressive movement is, "Another world is possible." The liberal left is not saying that another world is possible. The liberal left is saying that this is as good as it gets. The right is saying that another world is possible, or maybe they're saying pretty much, fuck the status quo, right? We don't want your future. We reject your idea of what the status quo should be and how to think about it. Data-driven determinism is inherently conservative, right? Basically, the patterns and trends of the past will continue into the future. This is the basic idea that what we've seen in the past would repeat itself. History repeats itself, right? As we know, history repeats itself sometimes. Often it doesn't. And when you think about the history that does repeat itself, it's kind of a cherry picking of patterns that you could recognize in hindsight. So from a liberal left perspective, we would say that based on the data that we have, another world is unlikely, right? And that is a very problematic approach for politics. How many of you are familiar with this kind of terrifying gouge? So at the day of the election in the U.S., the New York Times have published this gouge that was going from the prediction model to the actual reality, and so many people have had nightmares about this small visualization. But the problem there, like the problem with so much of our politics, is this false binary, the false dichotomy between the status quo and reactionism, right? As if these are the two options. If you don't want to if you don't want to look at reality the way we see it from a data-driven, determined position, then you're reactionary. Then you're basically shooting for fantasy. Like, we know how reality is. This is what we're going to get. If you act against it, you're basically acting against science. So let's consider some of the models we use for thinking about the future. So we talked about reactionism. Reactionism might be, and the way we're seeing it today, it might be resisting the status quo, but not through a vision of the future, but through a false idealization of the past. This idea that we believe that in the past it was great, and therefore it should be great again in the same model that we've seen, or we think that we've seen in the past. This is not an actual idea of moving forward. This is an idea of, again, cherry picking from the past in a much similar way. Like at the end of the day, it's another version of history repeats itself, or should repeat itself. There's another way of thinking about the future that is very popular these days, which is techno-determinism. In a way, it's a subset of the data-driven determinism phenomena. One of its biggest proponents is Ray Kurzweil, who's also one of the lead figures in the singularity movement. He constantly goes back to the Moore's law and the exponential growth. Like, if computers are becoming faster and smaller, then it means that everything is accelerating. Everything is becoming, it scales up in an exponential speed, and before you know it, we are all going to upload ourselves to the cloud, which, when you think about it, is actually suicide, right? So this is a suicidal movement that is inspired by some dubious phenomenon in technology that is already slowing down. But this is the leading ideology in Silicon Valley. This is one of the strongest ideological powers today, especially one that is presenting an agenda that is challenging the status quo, right? In a way, challenging the democratic status quo, challenging the humanistic status quo. And when you look at the books that they published, that really dominates the popular imagination, I think every one of these books is a New York Times bestseller. It's covered in the allure of the cutting-edge science and economics, whether it be digital technology or biology or economics. If you're going against this trend, then you're going against science again. But this trend is inherently depoliticizing, dehumanizing, and often just plain wrong. And we see it repeat itself in the language of neural networks, right? This idea that now we have a technology that we just feed it data, it finds the correlations themselves, it has no way of finding causation. It finds the correlation and it creates this output that we use because it's just more accurate. But what and again, this technology of that is model-less, that you feed a lot of data to a machine and you use the correlation that it gives you, it's very powerful. I'm using it in my own work, and I really recommend it. Not for really thinking where we should go next. In a way, this is the preferred progress that is informed by these approaches and technology is technological progress and social progress through political idleness, right? The machine will decide where we need to go next, and what we need to do, we just follow along. So some people are rejecting that, and they see in that a form of dystopia, right? In 1984, we've seen in the Orwell novel that this dystopia really expresses a lot of mistrust in the merger of politics and technology, and concerns about privacy and surveillance. The kind of language that we get from this approach, from looking at these dystopias, is a language of resistance, right? It inspires us to resist this undesirable future. And if you look at any bookshelf or any Hollywood blockbuster, you would always have tons of dystopias. Dystopias are very, very popular. They have this feeling that it's, we're being critical now, we're thinking about the future, we're making sure that these bad things would not happen. And we really need to do that. And especially when it comes to data-driven dystopias, as we're seeing live today, right? Climate change is itself a data-driven dystopia. And there's no doubt that we should use as much data and as much prediction as we can get there. And you could see graphs like this trying to determine where would Irma go next. This is the way to use data-driven determinism. But then it doesn't really apply. It doesn't really inform our political debate. It informs some concerns about the future, but then we don't really know how to follow up from that into politics. Because when you think about it, these dystopias are based on, this simplified graph, right? The future is going to be bad, right? And there's something very, you feel really good about yourself that you said that because you're being very critical right now. And it really reminds me of another guy who's considered to have said something different, something similar. So Lenin used to say, or is believed to have said, that the worse the better. Why? Because we need to ruin what we have right now in order to achieve, a better future. In his case, the communist utopia. But when we think about the world that we have right now, this is pretty much a flawed model. Like, we don't have this option. Keynote effect in 3, 2, 1. Okay. We don't have the option of going through dystopia if we want to survive. We have to cancel the apocalypse. We have to find ways in different models to go towards utopia. And it's a harder work when you don't have the luxury of just like annihilating everything that exists. So how do we cancel the apocalypse? There are many cruel and root-line lies we tell to children, but perhaps the most indicative is this: if you tell anyone your wish, it won't come true. This is a quote from Laurie Penny. Think about it. Like, why shouldn't children tell us what they want? You know why? Because they want a dog. You don't want them to have a dog, so keep it to yourself. But the idea that wishing towards a better future is something that you do quietly is really disturbed. It's something that everyone in the audience should stop doing. Every time you're in a birthday from now on, demand to hear what the good future looks like. Maybe you'll get some ideas yourself. And these two funny guys, Steve Lambert and Stephen Duncombe from the Center for Creative Activism, are really pushing this idea. They're running workshops. They're writing a book called How to Win. One of the assignments they give in their workshop is they're asking activists and artists that are involved with politics, how would winning look like? What would it look like when you win? And then activists are saying, oh, we'll manage to pass that law. Or urban planners are saying, we'll have more trees and better public transportation. And then they ask, okay, great, you got that. And then what? And they're like, oh, I didn't think about that. And then they come up with something a bit more daring. And then what? And they suffer through the process of really finding utopia. And utopia, this term that has arrived with a book by Thomas More from 1516, was an island of abundance where private possession was abolished. and it really served as a bold statement to say, we can imagine a better future than what we have right now. But why is it so hard to say what we wish for? Basically because dystopia is what we may lose. We know what we have, and we know how it would look like. We can imagine how it would look like to lose that. Utopia is what we may gain. Behavioral economics teaches us that we are risk averse, right? We hate to lose twice as much as we love to win, to gain. Dystopias are easier, right? Like data-driven determinism is conservative based on conserving what we have against the dangers of losing. The same with dystopias, right? Dystopias are conservative by definition. Like, we want to conserve what we have. We know what we have. We're not talking about creating a better future. We're talking about about maintaining the status quo. This is also kind of aligns with some of the themes in Naomi Klein's latest book, which is titled "No is Not Enough." Resisting is not enough. Like dystopias are not enough. It's time to talk about utopia. She brings up a case study, the LEAP Manifesto, which is a Canadian joint effort to come up with demands of what we need to do right now. And these are not small demands. These are big demands. They're claiming that they need to leap forward. And that leap is not only in the field of climate change. They realize through working together that no agenda is more important than the other. Climate, financial inequality, ending racism, political reform, all of these themes, we should work on all of them together. And there's something so strong and bold about this movement that I think it deserves some. It's very inspirational, but we can find inspiration not only in political organizing, also in science fiction. There's a new and emerging science fiction genre that actually started by a group in Brazil. It's called solarpunk. You can search for the hashtag mainly on Tumblr. And unlike cyberpunk, which presents this kind of dark and polluted world that is controlled by multinational corporations, what we have with solarpunk is unabashedly optimistic. They envision a future where technology and the environment are not at odds. And they want to imagine this not only as a literary sense, but to really invoke political imagination. They see solar energy and the distributed grid as both an infrastructure for a new infrastructure for energy, but for sharing power, but also sharing political power, right? Because it's time for us to start becoming excited about the work that we need to do with climate change. Because, it's really depressing right now. And it's really hard to mobilize people when you're so depressing. And when you're saying, we ran the numbers, this is what's going to happen, now just align yourself. No, this is not a statement for mobilization. And as much, I must say that a lot of what I'm seeing with solarpunk is really just the beginning. Style-wise, I'm not super excited about it yet. But politically, I think there's something so potent about just saying, no, we want to imagine a better future. We don't want to run into the hills and forget about our technology in our cities. No, we'll bring technology and the environment into the city, and we'll do it right now, and we'll actually start with the infrastructure. So this was also the sentiment of our that we took in a workshop run by Utopia Festival. It's a science fiction festival in Tel Aviv, where I'm from. And in December 2016, we ran this workshop also with a lot of people from the Republica community, using science fiction scenario as a methodology for extracting policy. We used a methodology from science fiction called backcasting. So if forecasting is looking at the past and then extrapolating that into the future, backcasting is the opposite. Imagining a future and then going back into the present, trying to think, how can we get there? But the thing that we found, we had 5 groups of brilliant people working on very, very interesting challenges. But then when we saw that the scenarios that they came up, many of them, including my group, went through catastrophe as a precursor for a desirable future. Again, because, you know, if we wipe out everything, then we can build whatever we want. I don't know. I don't want to go through apocalypse. I don't know about you. I think I do know about you. You don't want to go through apocalypse. And that's why in 2017, in December, we're running another workshop. And this time the title is Cancel the Apocalypse. This time we're not going to allow ourselves to go the easy route of annihilating everything in advance. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, and I agree. Utopias, right? We've been there. This is not like, we know what happens when you're so excited about utopias. To some degree, we can even think of this as a form of utopia, right? Because in the same way, like one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, one man's dystopia is another man's utopia. And we should be very careful about what people see as desirable futures. We see that in the timely reemergence of The Handmaid's Tale, right? It really reminds us how dystopian can reactionary utopias become, especially these days. And you know, The Handmaid's Tale is a story that inspires activism, resistance, critical examination of radical ideologies. But I see this dystopia and other dystopias as, I don't think we should give up on dystopias. I think they're useful. But I suggest that we use an approach that involves both attractors and detractors. I'll try to do this this example. So let's say we have a lot of ideas, right? And then if we have a dystopia, everybody runs away, right? We don't know what we want. We just know that we don't want this. Now, if we try again, we have a lot of ideas. We have a lot of people who are trying to think about their future, and then a big utopia comes, and they all align themselves. And on one hand, you know, there's a sense of purpose, there's a sense of sharing something, but there's something, at least I'm a bit concerned about this level of alignment. I really think that we should try to strive towards something that is maybe a mix of the two. So if we're thinking about the future, it should be using both attractors and detractors. Use utopias to show us the way, and use dystopias to make sure that we don't get lost, right? Because we could get lost, because we don't have, it's really hard to imagine the future to the level that you would know in advance exactly what everybody needs to do. Actually, you shouldn't do that. You should have general ideas, and you should know that you will make mistakes, and then you should anticipate that you might make mistakes, and you should understand how things could go wrong. And when they go wrong, they should start, when they start going wrong, they should start reminding us of these dystopias, so we remember again, what are we trying to do, right? These complex models of thinking about the future are something that is exemplified in Peter Frase's experiment in social science fiction, as he calls it. He wrote a book called Four Futures, where he's using scenario planning as a format to examine 4 possible futures. The way he lays it out is there are two. He claims there are two main axes of uncertainty. One is between scarcity and abundance. So scarcity would be everything that has to do with climate change, with too much populations, with food crisis, with water crisis, and so on. And abundance is everything that has to do with the role of automation, the role of new ways of production, things that actually allow us to have more than we have today. But he's saying there are so many, we're thinking along these lines, what he calls the economic axis, but we're not thinking about the political axis. And the political axis is between hierarchy and equality. And he creates these 4 quadrants, and through his book he describes communism as equality and abundance, rentism as hierarchy and abundance, socialism as equality and scarcity, and exterminism as hierarchy and scarcity. I won't go into that, but you should just read the book. But I will go briefly into my own project. In my own latest project, I tried to explore models for canceling the apocalypse, specifically in a place where it really feels like it's constantly on the verge of apocalypse, which is Jerusalem. This is a city that is captured by its past, and this year we marked the 50th year of the occupation of East Jerusalem, or if you ask some people, the unification of the city. And rather than constantly thinking about the past and arguing about the past, we try to think maybe 50 years, maybe more into the future. So we invited different authors, different leading authors, activists, artists in Israel. Each one of them from a different identity, kind of gender, political leaning, and so on. And we asked them to backcast and to create scenarios and to try to think about what kind of future may come in Jerusalem, and to lead us through one of these futures. And indeed, we have now 8 tours in Tel Aviv, some of them in multiple languages, and we launched it as a pilot in June. I'm actually going to talk a bit more about this project tomorrow in a panel, but specifically I wanted to talk about one of the contributions from a political organization, a grassroots movement called Two States, One Homeland. This is a new emerging movement that involves both Palestinians and Israelis, some of them even settlers that are currently living on occupied land. They're working against separation and for partnership. They're actually against the two-state solution, because the way they see it, we had enough of separations. In their future, that is narrated by the movement's leaders, Israel and Palestine are a confederation of 2 independent states with open borders. And specifically, one of the locations that they chose in the city is a very contested location today. It's called the village is Silwan, or as it's called by the Jewish tribe, City of David. And there's an archaeological site there that tries to argue for the Jewish history of the place. As you can see, this is just inside a Palestinian neighborhood. In the future that they describe, this is still an archaeological site, but it is run by both Jews and Palestinians who understand that they can find each other's pasts without it being kind of challenging each other, without it canceling their rights to their lives. So my first response to this kind of utopia is like, obviously I want a future like that, but I'm afraid. Like, I hear that and I'm like, automatically I'm like, this is naive. This could never happen. the thing is, no one would be mad at you if the apocalypse you predicted doesn't come, right? You predicted something, it didn't come. You can even say that it's, because you predicted it and we prepared in advance, or it doesn't come and or it does come, but nobody's, and then you can get to say, I told you so. But then if you work towards utopia and that doesn't come, people are too tired of disappointment, especially where I'm coming from. And it doesn't, and if it does come and it's not exactly what you hoped for, you're really putting yourself on the line. And I really appreciate the way that these people are putting themselves on the line, and I think more of us should put ourselves on the line. She's on the horizon. I go 2 steps, she moves two steps away. I walk 10 steps, and the horizon runs 10 steps ahead. No matter how much I walk, I'll never reach her. What good is utopia? That's what. It's good for walking. We need utopias to be able to get somewhere. It wouldn't be utopia. It wouldn't be that place that we're wishing for. But we need to know where to go. So to conclude, unlike the past, which we can mine for data and analyze for insight, the future does not exist. There is no future. There are always futures. Always. The concept of the future does not exist. It's a myth. We should always think about the futures as plural. We should consider the probable, the possible, the desirable. We should imagine attractors and detractors, utopias and dystopias. We should use data to inform decisions, not to dictate them. We should reclaim our political imagination. Thank you.
Exit Moon, a short story about staying with the trouble. It always rained now. Neither temperate nor extreme, the weather had been controlled, so it stayed at just one setting. The rising temperature and simultaneous flooding, hurricanes, and drought was creating serious disruptions in the market. I think it was the monster tidal wave that destroyed Shanghai and Shenzhen that made them wake up to how bad it was. The reinsurance portfolios couldn't be reinsured anymore. Banks were in a death spiral of virtual lending. They found a way to fix the disaster response system and an ingenious little hack to deal with the flooding, but the temperature still rose. So there were no more monsoons or droughts, but the price we paid was that it rained all the time. It was the best possible outcome, given how bad things were. Everything on Earth was in a state of permanent emergency. The truth is, the apocalypse happened in drips and drabs, whittling away at our spirit. No one was raptured away, and the Messiah did not appear. Neither did the robot army, nor the aliens. All this had happened because we simply refused to manage our addictions. So many of us left for the moon. They had discovered vast repositories of precious minerals deep in the heart of the moon. They found things we had on Earth like malachite, copper, cobalt, uranium, amethyst, and gold, and new elements that we had never encountered before. The surface of the moon was barren and harsh, but underneath, it was a rich tropical forest. They needed teams to set up extraction facilities that could extract, test, and evaluate how much lay under there, and figure out ways to trade and make money off these minerals. The Chinese had built incredible vast towers of server farms and data centers to handle the explosion in moon minerals trading. We traded these moon minerals and other moon products on specialized commodities exchanges on Earth. I worked with teams that isolated and tested the minerals. My role was to build algorithms that could predict values of these minerals based on what was being found, its quality, and considering the cost of being able to actually extract and use them. It was a computational exercise, and I had to work closely with extraction teams, which I actually liked a lot. I liked going out there in the field with them. Otherwise, My field was just a screen and a coffee machine and bad internet, no matter how big or shiny the Chinese server farms were. Being on the moon was very freeing for scientists. They were getting to do some exciting work towards exoplanetary exploration. Mars was now that much closer to being accessible. It really was a very exciting time for anyone in science and tech. Mars is also a place for rugged outdoor types. The more planet Earth crumbled, it seemed like our skill, creativity, and ingenuity as a species grew. We built amazing things. We got very good very fast at building almost intelligent robots. We had near total uplink for all humans and non-humans to communicate. There were still those pesky last-mile delivery issues, though. Poor people being left behind was still a thing. We just didn't know how to fix the old hard stuff: culture, bodies, history, politics. So we just ignored it. It was all inefficient. But we ignored it at our own peril. We kept forgetting how to make things work because we found that we liked applying algorithms to all kinds of complex problems: water shortage, poverty, gender violence. The reality is that algorithms and data work very well in science and engineering, like predicting climate change, but terribly when it comes to things involving humans. But that's what we did. I was part of one of the first crews of scientists to leave. To be honest, things out here are quite exciting. There is a sense of discovery and of actually being able to start over. It is like Mordor meets the Garden of Eden, but without talking snakes, organic apples, or naked and happy people. We had imported some cool solar energy innovations and architectural and design inventions with radical new sustainable materials we made in labs. We learned from plants. We built things mimicking capillary action in tall trees and how mushrooms grow. The word for world is forest. We had on Earth all these amazing technologies and ideas, but in the end, none of it scaled. We just couldn't unplug 200 years of belief and value in rationality and graft on new ways of being. With exponential growth, you need exponential solutions. But we didn't make it to those exponential solutions. It is a difficult balance to be here. We have all this cutting-edge stuff, very high-tech, but that doesn't mean we are not sorrowful about the state of things at home. In a way, our guilt at escaping made us feel virtuous in the best sense of the word, and dedicated to working hard to develop strong solutions. We were the pioneers colonizing a new world to support the old one. No one really wants to live on this godforsaken, barren little planet. We want to be back on our messed up, falling apart little blue planet. Then one day, things went wrong. An outdoor survey team that I work with picked up some disturbing electromagnetic signals. A significant planetary disturbance was predicted. Now, planets wobble in their orbit all the time, and the bigger the planet, the bigger the wobble, and the more dramatic the effect. It was Jupiter. But Jupiter was far away, and it would be years before we would feel it on the moon, which would give us time to fortify our station. However, Jupiter wobbling was affecting the asteroid belt and sending rocks hurtling out of orbit at very high speeds. The reason we have craters on the moon, in any case, is because it has been hit by asteroids so many times. So this wasn't something out of the blue, and it was always one of the biggest risks with being on the moon. We knew this could happen. But as usual, scientists fought with each other about who had the better data about what was really going to happen, about how much we should invest to offset some future disaster that we cannot really know the shape of. It was unlikely that something seriously negative was going to happen. Unlikely is a word that policymakers use a lot when they don't want to commit to doing something. We are a fragile and small community up here. Russian, Ukrainian, Chinese, Taiwanese, Indian, Pakistani, Israeli, Iranian. We have amazing technologies, but at the end of the day, we only still have each other eventually. Friendship and taking care of each other. We rely on these things much more eventually up here than we do on data. Data is the new nothing. It's just data. We were faced with hard choices. Hard choices always end up being utilitarian ones, sacrificing a few for the greater good. This is what the data tells you to do. If you don't buy this logic, then it is as if you are naive and don't really know how the world works. So some people had the option of leaving the moon. Those people who don't have to take care of anyone else or anything else. who feel that they can sever their connections and move on to the next thing. Sometimes this is survival, but sometimes it is escape, it is exit. But I'm done exiting. There is no exit. It is time to stay with the trouble. Thank you.
Anybody?
Yeah, hi. I wanted to ask you about your presentation were based on the fact that data-driven future can coexist with our own choices, but it just counts possibilities, not some outcome.
It's yeah. I'll try to make that more clear, because I definitely think that we should use data to understand what we should do next, or to inform these decisions. I think we got so excited by how technology becomes very efficient about a lot of these things that we feel like we can kind of outsource our political process to that, and that's where the problem happens. I think it's also a cultural change, and as a cultural change, we're expecting decision making to happen through technology, not through humans. So there's less. We don't allow leaders to actually lead. All they need to do is to follow the data, and that is the problem that I was trying to point at. And yeah.
Can I just add also that I think what we're trying to say is that what happens when you have these technologies in the hands of those with power, and what does that coming together mean? So by itself, it's not necessarily a bad thing. So there's an article in the most recent issue of The Economist of a study by a Stanford computational psychologist called Michał Kosinski, who has developed a facial recognition technology to identify gay faces and straight faces. And he actually presented this at an event in Berlin a few months ago. And so you can read about the study in The Economist, but in the presentation that he made, he talked about how he was training these algorithms. And then he showed us a slide, and then he showed us another slide, which was of a map of the world. And it showed all of the countries where homosexuality is criminalized and in some places penalized by death. And he said, wouldn't it be really terrible if some state, these states which criminalize homosexuality, if they got a hold of this technology? And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, and you're making it nonetheless and putting it out there, So it's a question of like, these things are great, but who's doing what with them and who has control over them? We have to understand them well enough to speak back, I think, or talk back. I think that's what we're trying to say.
Yeah, and they wouldn't tell us how to do that.
Yeah, that's exactly also one of the principles of Republica. That's why thank you so much. Looking into the technology, understanding it, and then make the right choices and the right campaigns, for example, the right politics, the right policies. Thank you very much that you were here for this talk. You're still here to also engage with further questions. I'm sorry, I have to cut it off. Because we're just so late in the program, unfortunately. We're continuing in a few minutes here with Gillian York and Hate Speech, so I would be glad to see a few faces still for that, and thanks a lot again.